Over the last couple of months, Energy Media has done quite a number of stories and interviews about the Alberta Energy Regulator. And one of the reasons for this is because Canada has the fourth or fifth largest oil and gas industry in the world, and most of it's in Alberta. So this is a really, really big industry, and regulation of it is a very, very large and complex issue. And you have to tell the story, and you have to look at different aspects of the story over and over and over again to really get a picture of what's going on. And this is one of those stories. So I'm going to talk to Drew Uchuk, who's a staff lawyer at the Public Interest Law Clinic at the University of Calgary, and he's the author of a blog post called Administrative Penalties at the Alberta Energy Regulator, a Gentle Slap on the Wrist for Ovintiv. So welcome to the interview, Drew.
Thanks for having me again.
Well, I'm fond of saying, and I'll say it again here, the Alberta Energy Regulator and its regulation of the Alberta oil and gas industry is a gargantuan onion. And there are many, many, many layers on this. And so no doubt we will have, as we peel back those layers, we will have you on again and again, I'm quite sure. But let's talk about this one. So the AER on April 5th, the AER issued a $6,500 regulatory penalty to Ovintiv Canada, which is formerly Encana until it moved to the US, its headquarters to the US in 2019. It's a bit of a convoluted story. I'll get you to tell it.
So it relates to Ovintiv, the new name for Encana, opens up this plant, they get their approvals, and then they realize after they've been operating for about 9 months that they changed their engineering design for the plant to lower one of the stacks. That is the chimney, basically, that's supposed to be dispersing the sulfur and whatever other chemicals into the atmosphere. And it's supposed to be high enough that it makes sure that they disperse over a zone where they're non-harmful. But they lower it in the engineering design by 25 meters. They forget to tell the AER. And I think they genuinely forget, because if they had realized this early on, they would have just fixed it. They could have gotten a new approval before they turned the plant on. But they turned the plant on. After 9 months, they realize, oh, crap, we're not actually approved to run the facility we built. We're approved to build one that's 25 meters high, 100-meter stack instead of 75. They don't tell the AER. This is the part where it gets, for me, much stranger. They don't tell the AER. They do a new air dispersion model, which takes about 49 days, and then they apply for an AER to run the facility that they actually have been running for almost a year. From what I can tell, at no point does the plant get shut down. They get a new approval from the AER on July 8th, 2021, which allows them now to be running the plant that they already are running. I asked the AER for the application material for the change, because I'm interested in how they reduced it by 25 meters and stayed within acceptable bounds. I don't have that yet. But the strangest part is that when they realize they're not following their approval, it's very clear they're supposed to report that to the AER immediately. That is, after the definitions section, the very first rule, not on this approval, not just on this approval, but on almost every approval for a project in Alberta. That's very standard. If you realize you are out of compliance with your approval, let the regulator know right away.
Right. And it's important to know that what they were emitting from that stack was sulfur dioxide, which is very toxic, and we don't want humans and animals breathing this stuff in. So the fact that they set it at 100, this is not a trivial matter.
This is not a small plant. This is a $600 million sour gas processing plant. This is one of the more dangerous types of facilities in Alberta.
Exactly right. And so it looks like to us from the outside that this is a very casual approach to what is potentially a very dangerous issue.
Absolutely.
So, and then on top of that, once they report it, the AER seems very casual about this. Okay, we'll look at your model. Okay, great. We'll grant you retrospective approval of this. Or did they grant retrospective approval, or did they say, okay, we'll approve it as of now, but now we have to, because you broke the rules, very clearly broke the rules, now we have to give you a penalty on top of that?
Yes, that's what they do. They don't retroactively change it. And well, I mean, yeah, they don't retroactively change it. Instead, they give a penalty. And then the story becomes amusing when you check the penalty amount. They end up paying $6,500. And they and I lay out in the blog post how extensive the potential penalties are. And it's normal in Canadian law that potential penalties can run very, very high, but penalties would have run into the tens of millions of dollars and further, depending on how far they had wanted to go if they taken this by prosecution. But they choose to go by administrative penalty, which sets a much lower cap on penalty because it has less procedural protections. But even there, on the 9 months, they would have run into, I think, $5,000 a day if they had pursued that, or $2,500 a day. And they don't even pursue a by day penalty, which is explicitly allowed, or a clawback of profits option, also laid out. They don't pursue anything at all. They mentioned that in one of the meetings, Ovintiv asked them, are we going to be penalized per day on this? And they say, no, we're not doing that. But no real explanation of why. I mean, I think even Ovintiv was confused because this plant is so large that if they had been fined on the upper end of 2,500 to 5,000 per day, Ovintiv probably could have paid it and still not lost a ton of money on this.
So one of the, I guess the casual observer looking at this is going to say, well, here you have a potential, we're talking sour gas, so it's deadly to humans. Potential big health complication. And we should point out that it wasn't that many years ago that there was a worker killed in southeast, I think it was southeastern Saskatchewan, in a situation where there was sulfur dioxide present. So I mean, there have been accidents where people have been injured or killed.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is potentially a big problem. They were out of compliance for quite a long time, relatively speaking. And the AER slaps them on the wrist, as you say in your blog post. Is it part of the rationale for applying administrative penalties is to make sure that others, and including Ovintiv, don't do this again? Because if all you have to pay is $6,500, where is the incentive for Ovintiv to follow the rules next time?
And I think the answer is nowhere. I lay out some of the descriptions of how sentencing is supposed to work. Sentencing for a corporate offender must be such that fine imposed appears to be more than a licensing fee for illegal activity or the cost of doing business. And I'll give a short example for anyone listening who hasn't thought about regulatory sentencing before. But if you can, at a nearby lot, pay $10 for parking, or you can risk a $12 ticket for just street parking, people will just street park because it's basically the same cost as just paying for the thing. That's what they mean by a licensing fee for an illegal activity. That is a fine that is set way too low. And for 49 days of operating a plant of this size, $6,500 is far below a licensing fee. That if you violate the rules, what this is saying is that's fine. Just prove that, or provide evidence to the AER that there wasn't any really big environmental deal anyways, and it's okay. And that I think is completely the wrong message.
Indeed. And we've been having a number of interviews, Drew. I've interviewed you, I've interviewed viewers can go on the Energy Talks podcast to see a couple of interviews with regulatory experts in our YouTube channel, the Energy Media YouTube channel. You can see interviews with Drew and other experts about regulatory capture. But the point here is that there are two interests that the energy regulator has to balance: the public interest and the industry interest. At the very least, the public interest should be the same, given equal weight to the industry interest. And expert after expert has said that in Alberta, the AER almost entirely is weighted to the industry interest, not the public interest. And this would seem to be a perfect example of regulatory capture.
Yeah. And this is another way to frame it is that this is the back end, because there's first the licensing questions, then there's the monitoring questions, and then there's sentencing. You can probably find interim steps if you wanted. But at all of those steps, you can see the regulator repeatedly tilt towards industry interests.
Right. And I'll be doing another story next week when I'm the week after when I'm in Alberta about a sour gas plant that's near Edmonton, of all places, that is, according to my source, and we'll check this out, of course, doing something not dissimilar to what Ovintiv is doing. So that then raises the question, to a journalist who gets, here's one example, oh, and here's another example, are how many more examples of this kind of, light administrative penalty, which doesn't serve to discourage behavior? How many more examples are there out there?
And potentially a lot, because I didn't dig into history. I didn't look back for old examples of regulatory mistakes. I just watched the AER News website, and this came up right into my lap. I didn't do any work to find this.
Right. This is business as usual.
Yeah.
As they say in the industry, SOP, standard operating procedure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, Drew, thank you very much for this. We will be doing more of these kinds of stories, and we'll look forward to chatting with you in the future.
Perfect. Thanks.